"Can you be my daddy?" Little girl begs the lonely rancher. That's how it started, right there in the snow, with the whole town watching. The rancher's got no wife, no kin, no reason to take her in. But he owes a debt older than the ma. Scars on his hands. She's got eyes that know too much for her years, and a shadow at her back wearing a preacher's coat. Folks say the orphanage is law. Folks don't know what happens behind its doors. The wind carries whispers of her mother's people far to the south. And the only man who can keep her safe rides with a limp, a rifle, and a promise to the dead. When the church bell stops and the rail whistle screams, it'll be too late. To decide, does he risk his land, his name, maybe his life, to keep one girl out of the dark? Or does the lonely rancher watch her disappear forever down the tracks? Before we begin, I invite you to take a breath. This space is for the quiet. Believers. The ones who know small kindnesses can ripple into something greater. The snow swirled around the buckboard as Sam guided his team down the rutted road leading out of Calico Crossing. His shoulders hunched against the biting wind, and his bad leg ached something fierce from the cold. But it wasn't the weather that made his jaw clench tight. It was the girl huddled next to him on the wagon seat. Wrapped in the spare blanket he kept under the bench, Clara May sat straight back despite her shivering, those dark eyes fixed ahead like she was afraid to look his way. Her small hands clutched the rough wool blanket around her thin shoulders. The deputy's words about disposing of unclaimed orphans still rang in Sam's ears, making his stomach turn. The creak of leather harness and the soft thud of hooves filled the silence between them. Sam could feel the weight of what she'd said, pressing down heavier than the snow. Jessie May's daughter. His mind wandered back to that blood-soaked day when Jesse had thrown himself between Sam and a Confederate bullet. The debt he owed his friend sat like a stone in his chest. "Ain't right to tell Taley's girl," Sam finally said, his voice gruff. Jessie May never mentioned no child. Clara's chin lifted. "My papa wrote to Mama every month before he died. She read me his letters till she got sick last spring." Her voice wavered but held firm. "He told her about you, said you was the best scout in the whole Union Army. Said you could track a hawk's shadow across the prairie." Sam's hands tightened on the reins. That had been Jesse's favorite joke about Sam's tracking skills. Not something a child would know unless— "Your mama," he said carefully. "She was Apache?" Clara nodded, pulling the blanket closer. "Rosa May, from the Chiricahua Band. Papa met her when he was stationed at Fort Bowie." A shadow crossed her face. "After she died, the Indian agent said I had to go to the orphanage, said it was for my own good." The wagon wheel hit a deep rut, making them both bounce. Sam steadied the team before speaking again. "Why'd you run away?" "Deacon Williams came yesterday." Clara's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Said he needed a servant girl to help his wife. But Tommy, he's been there longest. He told me what really happens to Indian girls who get placed with families." She swallowed hard. "I weren't staying to find out if he was right." Anger flared in Sam's chest, hot enough to chase away the winter chill. He'd heard rumors about the deacon's treatment of orphans, but the man's connections with the territorial governor made folks look the other way. The snow was falling heavier now, thick flakes catching in Clara's dark hair. She looked so much like Jessie, same determined set to her jaw, same way of holding herself straight against trouble. Sam had turned his back on too much wrong in the years since the war, trying to keep to himself, trying to forget. "Reckon we ought to get you something hot to eat when we reach the ranch," he found himself saying. "Got some beef stew left from yesterday." Clara's shoulders relaxed just a fraction. "I can cook," she offered quickly, "and clean. And I'm good with horses. Grandfather Naish taught me before." She trailed off, then added in a smaller voice, "I won't be no trouble, sir. I promise." Sam grunted, uncomfortable with the desperate edge in her voice. No child should have to bargain for safety. "We'll sort all that out tomorrow," he said. "Tonight, you just get warm and rest." They rode on in silence as the early winter dusk settled around them. Sam's ranch was modest. A two-room cabin, small barn, and a corral that needed mending, but it was solid shelter against the storm. He thought of Jesse, who dreamed of bringing his Apache bride to start a horse ranch after the war, who died making sure Sam lived to see peace. The girl beside him was all that was left of those dreams. She was Jesse's blood, and Apache too. A child of both worlds, just like her father had hoped to bridge them. Sam didn't know the first thing about raising a girl, but he knew what he owed his friend. The snow kept falling as his team plodded toward home, covering their tracks, rapping. The world in white silence. Whatever came next, Sam reckoned, would have to wait for tomorrow. Tonight was for keeping one small soul safe from the storm. The buckboard swayed and creaked as they made their way through the deepening snow. Sam's ranch lay 3 miles outside of town, tucked away in a quiet valley where most folks didn't bother to venture. Clara huddled deeper into the new coat they'd gotten at the mercantile, its rough wool still stiff with newness. Sam had insisted on the purchase, along with a pair of sturdy boots. When he'd seen her threadbare clothes, every few minutes he felt her quick glances, studying him like a cautious deer might watch a stranger at the watering hole. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady clip-clop of hooves and the soft shush of runners cutting through snow. His ranch came into view as they crested the last rise, a simple cabin with a tin roof, smoke curling from the stone chimney, where he'd banked the morning's fire. A small barn stood off to one side, and beyond it stretched the winter bare pasture where his handful of cattle grazed in warmer months. "It ain't much," Sam said gruffly, pulling the team to a stop by the cabin door, "but it's dry and warm inside." Clara scrambled down from the wagon before he could offer help, then stood uncertainly as he unhitched the horses. She followed him into the barn, watching intently as he settled the team in their stalls with hay and fresh water inside the cabin. Sam built up the fire until flames crackled high, pushing back the early evening shadows. The main room was sparse, but tidy, a plank table with 2 chairs, a cook stove, and shelves holding his few possessions. His bedroom door stood ajar, showing a narrow bed with a faded quilt. The other bedroom, unused since he'd built the place, waited behind its closed door. "Sit," he told Clara, gesturing to the table. "You must be hungry." She perched on the edge of the chair, hands folded in her lap, while he warmed up beans and cornbread left from breakfast. When he set the plate before her, her eyes went wide. But she didn't reach for the spoon. "Go on," he encouraged. "Eat while it's hot." She needed no further urging. Sam watched as she practically inhaled the food, scraping the plate clean with the last bit of cornbread. Her manners were good, but there was a desperate edge to her hunger that made his chest tight. The orphanage clearly hadn't been feeding her proper. "There's more if you want it," he offered, already reaching for her plate. Clara shook her head, though he caught the longing look she gave the pot. "Thank you, sir, but I COULDN, single quotes D. She swallowed hard, then words spilled out in a rush. "I had to run away. I heard Deacon Carr talking to Mr. Whitaker about taking me on as help at his ranch. 3 girls already went there and never came back. Tommy, he works in the deacon's office sometimes," he said, double quotes, her voice dropped to a whisper. He said, "Those girls weren't the first to disappear. Said the deacon knows all about it, but takes Whitaker's money anyway." Sam's hands clenched into fists under the table. He'd heard rumors about Whitaker's ranch, whispers about young girls sent there as servants who vanished without trace. But no one ever seemed to have proof, and the deacon's word carried weight with both Marshall and Judge. "I'll speak to Marshall Avery in the morning," he said slowly. "Get this sorted proper like." "No." Clara's cry was sharp with fear. She half rose from her chair, eyes wide. "Please don't send me back." The deacon, he'll just find another place to send me. Somewhere worse, maybe. He doesn't care what happens to Indian girls. Says we're better off learning our place early. The bitterness in her young voice cut like a knife. Sam remembered Jesse talking about his Apache wife, about wanting their child to grow up proud of both bloodlines. Instead, here was his daughter, treated like she was worth less than cattle to be traded. "You can have the spare room tonight," he said finally. "We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." Relief washed over Clara's face. She helped him clear the dishes without being asked, then followed him to the second bedroom. A narrow bed with fresh sheets waited. Sam changed them regular, though he couldn't have said why he bothered until now. "Sleep well," he told her awkwardly. "Door locks from inside if you've a mind to use it." After she closed the door, Sam settled in his chair by the fire, staring into the flames. Jesse's laugh echoed in his memory, bright and fearless even in the worst of times. He looked down at his hands, remembering them slick with his friend's blood as Jesse bled out on that Pennsylvania field. The wind picked up outside, whistling through the eaves with a lonely sound. Sam checked both doors twice before turning in, making sure the locks were solid. He knew the deacon's influence reached far, knew there'd be trouble come morning. But, for tonight at least, Jesse's girl was safe. Morning crept over the horizon in shades of pewter, the sun a dim circle behind thick clouds. Sam stood at the cabin door, watching his breath cloud in the frigid air. His old wound ached fierce in this weather, making his limp more pronounced as he moved toward the barn. "Keep the fire stoked," he told Clara, who hovered anxiously in the doorway. "I'll be back before sundown." His bay gelding nickered a greeting as Sam saddled up, tightening the cinch with practiced hands. The familiar motions helped steady his mind for what lay ahead. He'd spent most of the night wrestling with what to say to Marshal Avery, how to make the man understand. The ride into Calico Crossing took longer than usual, the horse picking its way careful through fresh fallen snow. Sam dismounted outside the marshal's office, his boots crunching on packed snow as he climbed the wooden steps. Marshal Avery sat behind his desk, reading through a stack of papers. He looked up as Sam entered, his expression guarded. "Figured you'd be coming by, Brogan. Take a seat." Sam remained standing, his hat in his hands. "It's about the girl, Marshal. Clara May." "The orphanage has legal custody," Avery said flatly. "Deacon Carr's already been by this morning with the paperwork. You've got no choice but to return her. She says girls are disappearing from that Whitaker place. The ones the deacon's been sending there." Sam leaned forward, planting both hands on the marshal's desk. "Ain't you going to look into that?" Avery shuffled his papers, not meeting Sam's eyes. "Deacon Carr vouches for Whitaker. Says the girls get properly placed in good Christian homes after their time there. Nothing illegal about that. Jessie May's daughter deserves better than." "Jessie May's dead," Avery cut in. "And his Apache wife too. The girl's a ward of the county. Now legal and proper. You bring her back today, or I'll have to come out there myself." The creak of floorboards behind Sam announced another presence. He turned to find Deacon Carr in the doorway, his black coat dusted with snow. "Brother Brogan," the deacon said smoothly, "I trust you've come to your senses about this unfortunate situation." Steel glinted in his pale eyes, belying his pleasant tone. "She ain't going to Whitaker's place," Sam growled. "I made a promise to her father." "A promise to a dead man holds no legal weight." The deacon stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm willing to forgive your interference if you return the child quietly today. Otherwise, things might become difficult for you." Sam straightened to his full height, looking down at the shorter man. "That a threat, Deacon?" "Merely a reminder of Christian charity," Carr replied, "and the importance of maintaining proper order in our community." Sam's jaw clenched. Without another word, he pushed past the deacon and out into the bitter morning. As he mounted up, he caught sight of 3 riders leaving town behind him, keeping their distance but clearly following. Instead of taking the direct route home, Sam guided his horse into the maze of cottonwood draws that traced the valley. He knew these trails better than most, having spent years riding fence lines through the area. After an hour of doubling back and crossing his own tracks, he lost his shadows in the thick brush. The sun was westering by the time he reached the ranch. Clara met him at the door, relief plain on her face. She'd kept the fire burning bright, and the cabin was warm against the gathering evening. As Sam hung his coat, Clara cleared her throat. "I could help with chores," she offered tentatively. "To earn my keep, I mean." Sam studied her for a long moment. She was small for her age, but her eyes held determination, just like Jessie's had. "Reckon we could start with kindling," he said. "Finally, fire needs feeding regular in this weather." He showed her how to split the smaller logs, guiding her hands on the hatchet. "Keep your thumb tucked," he instructed. "That's it. Nice and steady." They worked side by side until darkness fell, Clara's pile of kindling growing steadily larger. She took to the task natural-like, just as she had to feeding the chickens that morning. After a simple supper of salt pork and potatoes, Sam pulled out his battered journal, a habit he'd carried home from the war. While Clara cleaned the dishes, he wrote by lamplight about Jessie's daughter finding her way to his door, about the weight of old debts and new promises. The scratching of his pencil paused at a sound from outside, hoofbeats, distant but clear in the still night. He listened until they faded into the keening wind, then turned back to his writing, though his hand stayed close to the rifle propped against his chair. Dawn painted the frost-covered windows in pale gold as Sam stirred the embers in the hearth. Clara emerged from the spare room, her hair neatly braided, already dressed for the day. "Time you learned the morning routine," Sam said, pulling on his heavy coat. "Ranch work starts early and ends late." Clara nodded eagerly, wrapping herself in the coat he'd bought her. Together they stepped out into the crisp morning air, their boots crunching through fresh snow. Steam rose from their breath in white puffs as they made their way to the barn. "First thing is feeding," Sam explained, showing her where he kept the chicken feed in a covered barrel. "These hens are particular about getting their breakfast on time." Clara took the tin scoop, measuring out feed just as Sam demonstrated. The chickens clustered around her feet, pecking eagerly at the scattered grain. A smile touched her face as she watched them. "Never been this close to chickens before," she admitted, carefully stepping among the flock. "They're friendlier than I expected." "They'll be right fond of you once they know you're the one feeding them," Sam said, checking the water trough to ensure it hadn't frozen overnight. In the barn, Sam walked Clara through each task, showing her how to check the horse's hooves for stones, the proper way to measure out oats, where to hang tack so it would dry properly. She listened intently, asking careful questions and mimicking his movements with determined concentration. "You're a quick study," Sam observed as she successfully secured the barn door latch. "Most folks take longer to get the hang of things." Clara ducked her head at the praise. "I like learning new things. At the orphanage, they only taught us cleaning and sewing." Their morning routine was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Sam tensed, but relaxed slightly when he recognized Mrs. Harriet Abernathy's buggy coming up the drive. The widow's arrival was as predictable as winter snow. Any hint of gossip drew her, like honey drew flies. "Samuel Brogan," she called out, pulling her horse to a stop. "I brought you some fresh bread, hearing you had a guest and all." Her sharp eyes fixed on Clara, taking in every detail of the girl's appearance. Sam helped Mrs. Abernathy down from her buggy, knowing better than to refuse her hospitality. "Much obliged, Mrs. Abernathy. Won't you come in for some coffee?" Inside the cabin, Mrs. Abernathy settled herself by the fire, bread basket in her lap. "Now then, young lady, do tell me how you came to be staying with our Mr. Brogan here." The Whole town's fairly buzzing with curiosity. Clara glanced at Sam before answering. Mr. Brogan knew my father in the war, ma'am. My name's Clara May. May, you say? Mrs. Abernathy's eyebrows rose. Would that be Jessie May's girl? The one who married that double quote. She paused delicately. That Indian woman? My mother was Apache, Clara said quietly but firmly. She died when I was very small. Mrs. Abernathy clicked her tongue sympathetically, but her eyes gleamed with fresh gossip. She stayed for nearly an hour, asking pointed questions about Clara's time in the orphanage and her plans for schooling. Sam watched the widow note every detail of his cabin's condition, from the newly swept floors to the extra plate on the table. After Mrs. Abernathy finally took her leave, Sam turned to Clara. Best mind what you say around her. Gossip travels faster than winter sickness in these parts, and some folks ain't kind about mixed blood. Clara nodded solemnly. I know. That's partly why the deacon wanted to send me away. He said no decent family here would take me. They spent the afternoon checking fence lines near the cabin, Sam showing Clara how to spot breaks in the wire. As they worked, she proved steady and attentive, though her small hands struggled with the heavier tools. Over supper of beans and Mrs. Abernathy's bread, Clara pushed her food around her plate before speaking. My mother's people, I don't remember much about them, but I know my grandfather might still be living, south past the big red cliffs. That's what my father told me before he left for the war. Sam set down his coffee cup, remembering Jesse's stories about his wife's people. The Red Cliffs would be near the Apache territories, a long ride through dangerous country. He said nothing, but his mind worked over distances and supplies needed for such a journey. Would you like some tea? He asked instead, seeing Clara's empty cup. Your father always said your mother made the best pine needle tea he'd ever tasted. Clara's eyes brightened at this small detail about her mother. They shared the tea in comfortable silence, lamplight casting warm shadows on the cabin walls. Outside, wind whistled through the eaves, carrying the promise of more snow. Before turning in, Sam checked the rifle by the door, making sure it was loaded and within easy reach. He'd seen tracks in the snow that afternoon. Riders had circled the cabin while they were checking fences. The deacon, he reckoned, wasn't finished with them yet. Snow piled against the cabin windows, turning the morning light a soft, ghostly white. The storm had swept in before dawn, bringing winds that moaned through every crack and crevice. Sam added another log to the fire, watching Clara at the table as she mended one of his old shirts with neat, careful stitches. A quiet tune drifted from her lips as she worked, a melody that stopped Sam in his tracks. He knew that song. Jessie had hummed it during long nights on watch, saying it was one his wife taught him, passed down through her Apache kin. Your father used to sing that, Sam said softly, settling into his chair by the fire. Around the campfires when we were stationed near Shiloh. Clara's fingers stilled on the fabric. You knew him then? Before the battle? Known him since we mustered in. Sam's voice grew distant with memory. Jessie May was the kind of man who'd give you his last biscuit if you were hungry. Stubborn about it, too, wouldn't take no for an answer. The shirt lay forgotten in Clara's lap as she turned toward him, hungry for every detail. What else was he like? Had a way with horses that seemed like magic. Could calm the wildest mount with just his voice. Sam smiled faintly. But it was at Shiloh where he showed what he was really made of. Clara drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. Tell me, we were pinned down bad. Confederate artillery had us scattered, men running everywhere. Sam's words came slowly, as if pulled from deep within. Your father he saw wounded. Boy, couldn't have been more than 16, caught in the open. Jessie didn't hesitate. Ran straight through cannon fire to drag that boy to safety. Did the boy live? Thanks to your father, he did. Sam reached into his coat pocket, withdrawing A worn envelope. Jesse had this letter he was meaning to send you. Carried it for days, waiting for the mail rider. Never got the chance to. His voice trailed off, but Clara understood. She took the envelope with trembling hands, though she didn't open it. Yet, that was the kind of man your father was, Sam continued. Thinking of others right to the end. When that shell hit. He stopped, the memory still too raw. Thank you for telling me, Pa, Clara said softly, then caught herself. I mean, Mr. Brogan. The word hung in the air between them. Sam felt something shift in his chest, not painful, but profound, like ice breaking up on a spring river as evening. Approached, Clara surprised him by kneeling beside her bed to pray. Sam stood awkwardly in the doorway, remembering countless nights in camp when Jesse would do the same. Since the war, Sam had avoided prayer, feeling too bitter about all he'd seen. But tonight, something drew him to kneel beside Clara. Our Father, she began in a clear voice, and Sam found himself joining in, the familiar words returning like old friends. Morning brought a heavy knock that rattled the cabin door. Sam opened it to find Marshal Tom Avery on the porch, snow dusting his shoulders. Sam, the marshal said, his expression grave. He held out an official-looking paper. Got no choice in this. Counties ordered Clara May returned to the orphanage. Within 7 days. Sam took the notice without a word, scanning the formal text with growing coldness. Behind him, he heard Clara's small gasp. She'd crept close enough to hear. You know what'll happen if she goes back, Sam said quietly. The marshal's face showed genuine regret. Law's the law, Sam. 7 days. He turned and walked back to his horse, leaving boot prints in the fresh snow. Sam closed the door, ice flowing through his veins. Clara stood in the middle of the room, her face pale but determined. My grandfather, she burst out. My mother's father, he could take me in. The deacon couldn't touch me then. Her voice grew smaller. But I don't want to never see you again. You're the only one who tells me about my father. Sam studied the notice again, mind working. A week wasn't much time to ride into Apache territory, especially in winter. But Jesse would have done it for his girl without hesitation. We'll find him, Sam said firmly, your grandfather. Though it means riding deep into winter country. He met Clara's eyes. And we'll figure out a way for me to stay part of your life. That's a promise. Clara's smile broke through like sunlight after storm clouds. She threw her arms around Sam's waist, and after a moment's surprise, he hugged her back. The marshal's notice lay on the table, its 7-day deadline a shadow over their small victory. But Sam felt stronger than he had in years. He had a purpose. Now, a debt to repay, and most importantly, a child to protect. Jesse would expect nothing less. Sam rose before dawn, his breath visible in the cold cabin air. The preparations couldn't wait, not with only 6 days left before the orphanage's deadline. He moved through the dim light with purpose, gathering supplies and checking them twice against his mental list. Clara joined him as the sun crept over the horizon, her small hands eager to help. Together, they loaded the buckboard with essentials. Thick wool blankets rolled tight against the weather, bags of jerky and dried beans, coffee grounds, and a compact canvas tent Sam hadn't used since his army days. Remember what I taught you about packing light? Sam asked, watching Clara arrange their supplies. She nodded, face serious. Important things first. No room for extras when you're traveling far. That's right. Sam felt a flutter of pride at how quickly she learned. He'd shown her just yesterday, and already she was applying the lesson. In the barn, Sam measured out extra feed for the livestock, marking clear instructions on a slate. Mrs. Abernathy appeared just as he finished, wrapped in her thickest shawl against the morning chill. You'll check on the place? Sam asked, though he already knew the answer. Despite her tendency to gossip, Mrs. Abernathy was reliable when it mattered. Every other day, she promised, eyes bright with curiosity. Though I must say, heading south this time of year seems mighty peculiar. Sam kept his voice neutral. Got business that won't wait for spring. Mrs. Abernathy glanced at Clara, who was double-checking the horses' harnesses. I reckon you do at that, she said softly. Godspeed to you both. They set out as the morning. Frost still crunched under the wagon wheels. Clara sat straight beside Sam, excitement visible in every line of her body, despite the cold. Her breath came out in white puffs as she pointed out landmarks they passed. The winter sun hung low and weak in the sky, offering little warmth as they traveled. Sam kept them moving at a steady pace, knowing they needed to make good time while staying mindful of the horse's strength. Clara asked questions about the territory ahead, and Sam answered what he could, sharing tales from his own travels years ago. As dusk approached, Sam guided the buckboard into a sheltered draw where rough walls of rock would block the worst of the wind. Clara helped him unload, her movements careful but confident. Now watch close, Sam instructed as he built their fire. Out here, you've got to think ahead. Wind can shift in the night, so we bank it proper. He demonstrated how to arrange stones and dig a shallow pit, explaining each step. Clara absorbed every detail, helping him position the logs just so. When the flames caught and held steady, her smile lit up brighter than the fire itself. They shared a simple supper of jerky and hard biscuits, huddled close to the warmth. The stars emerged one by one overhead, brilliant in the clear winter sky. Sam showed Clara how to wrap her blanket tight against the cold, tucking the edges to trap heat like he'd learned in the war. Morning brought frost-stiffened blankets but clear skies. Sam taught Clara to revive the banked coals, and soon they had a proper breakfast of biscuits and bacon sizzling in the pan. The smell drew a curious coyote to the edge of their camp, but Sam's presence kept it at a respectful distance. When you're traveling like this, Sam explained as they ate, you've got to think careful about every item you carry. Each thing needs to earn its keep, so to speak. He showed her how to pack the cooking gear so it wouldn't rattle, how to store food safe from varmints. They made good time that second day, the horses settling into a steady rhythm. As evening approached, they came upon a small reservation settlement, just a handful of buildings and corrals. Nestled against a hillside. An elderly Navajo woman stood in the doorway of one home, watching their approach. She introduced herself as Sarah Benelli, her English clear but accented. When she noticed Clara's interest in a limping goat in the nearby pen, her weathered face softened. Poor creature caught its leg in some wire, Sarah explained. Been having trouble tending to it proper with my arthritis. Clara glanced at Sam, who nodded his permission. She approached the goat slowly, speaking soft words of comfort. The animal allowed her near, and Clara examined the injury with gentle hands. I can help clean it, she offered. And wrap it fresh if you have bandages. Sarah's smile deepened the lines around her eyes. Help me with that, child, and you'll have warm stew and a bed for the night. Sam watched as Clara worked alongside Sarah, the two of them communicating through gestures and shared purpose when words weren't enough. The old woman showed Clara how to mix a poultice of local herbs, while Clara demonstrated the bandaging technique she'd learned at the orphanage. By nightfall, they sat around Sarah's table, sharing a hearty stew of rabbit and wild onions. The goat rested easier on its freshly wrapped leg, and Sarah treated Clara like a long-lost granddaughter, teaching her words in Navajo between spoonfuls. Sam observed it all quietly, noting how naturally Clara moved between their world and Sarah's. She showed the same respect and attention whether dealing with Mrs. Abernathy's fussy instructions or Sarah's traditional ways. In her, Sam saw echoes of Jesse's gift for bringing people together, and something tight in his chest loosened just a bit. Dawn painted the sky in pale streaks as Sam and Clara broke camp. Frost sparkled on the sagebrush, and their breath hung in white clouds. The horses' hooves crunched through frozen puddles as they pressed deeper into the winter-touched landscape. Clara sat wrapped in blankets beside Sam, her eyes scanning the horizon. They crossed 3 ice-rimmed streams, the buckboard creaking as Sam guided the team through the shallowest spots. The water's surface crackled beneath the wheels, breaking winter's thin skin. "Land changes here," Sam explained, gesturing to where the sagebrush flats stretched toward distant mesas. "Apache country now." Clara nodded, sitting straighter. Her hands clutched the blanket tighter, but her gaze never stopped searching. As the afternoon sun hung low and weak in the western sky, she suddenly grabbed Sam's arm. "Look there." She pointed toward a thin column of smoke rising against the pale blue sky. Could that be them? Sam squinted at the distant marker. "Might be. We'll approach slow and proper, show we mean no harm." He turned the buckboard toward the smoke, but kept to open ground where they could be easily seen. Within half an hour, movement caught his eye, riders on the ridge above, their forms dark against the sky. Sam counted 4 mounted figures watching. "Their approach. Stay calm," he murmured to Clara. "Let them see we're peaceful." When they were still a good distance from the camp, Sam drew the horses to a halt. He climbed down carefully, favoring his bad leg, and raised both hands palm out, in the universal gesture of peace. Clara remained in the wagon, though he could feel her tension. "We come seeking the family of Rosa May," Sam called out clearly, "wife of Jesse May, who served with me in the Union Army." For a long moment, only the winter wind answered. Then 2 riders descended the ridge, approaching at an easy lope. They carried no visible weapons, but Sam knew that meant little. Both men wore heavy blankets against the cold, their dark eyes studying Sam and Clara carefully. The older of the 2 spoke. In English, "Why do you seek Rosa's people?" Sam gestured to Clara. "This here's her daughter. We've come looking for her grandfather." The riders exchanged glances, then nodded. "Follow," the older man said, wheeling his horse, but slowly. They led the way around the base of the ridge to where a small encampment nestled in a protected hollow. Several lodges stood in a rough circle, with horses picketed nearby. Women paused in their work to watch the strangers approach, and children ducked behind their mothers' skirts. Near the central fire stood a man Sam guessed to be in his 60s, his gray hair braided neatly, wearing a mixture of traditional dress and trader's clothes. He watched their approach with an unreadable expression, but his eyes fixed on Clara's face. Sam helped Clara down from the wagon. She stood straight despite her obvious nervousness, looking directly at the older man. For a long moment, grandfather and granddaughter studied each other across the space between them. Then the old man's expression softened. "I see my Rosa in your face," he said quietly. "I am Nate May." Clara took a hesitant step forward. "I'm Clara May, your granddaughter." Nate opened his arms, and Clara ran to him. He embraced her tightly, speaking soft words in Apache that made tears spring to Clara's eyes, though she couldn't understand them. As the sun set, the camp gathered around the central fire. Sam sat with Clara and Nate, accepting a cup of coffee from one of the women. Clara leaned against her grandfather's side as he began sharing stories of her mother, how Rosa had loved to sing, how quick she was to laugh, how she could gentle even the wildest horse. "She met your father at the trading post," Nate recalled, his voice warm with memory. "He was different from other soldiers, showed respect, learned our ways. When they married, he became part of our family." Clara drank in every word, occasionally glancing at Sam as if to connect these stories with the ones he'd told her about Jesse. The firelight played across her face, highlighting how she truly did resemble the small tin type of Rosa that Nate brought out to show them. When the stories paused, Sam cleared his throat. "There's trouble back in Calico Crossing," he explained, describing the orphanage's claim and the deadline they faced. "Clara ran to me for help, but legally they have authority unless family claims her. Nate listened gravely, then looked at his granddaughter. Among our people, children belong to their family, not to papers. But I understand the white man's laws. He touched Clara's cheek gently. You may stay here with your mother's people, or choose another path. Whatever you decide, I will sign what papers are needed to make it right in both worlds. Clara's eyes filled with tears of relief. She hugged her grandfather tightly, then reached for Sam's hand. Around them, the fire crackled and sparked toward the star-filled sky, while the night wind carried the lonely song of a distant coyote. Morning sunlight warmed the camp as Clara watched two Apache women grinding corn between smooth stones. Their movements were practiced and rhythmic, accompanied by soft humming. One of the women, her dark eyes kind, motioned Clara closer. Like this, she demonstrated, showing how to pour the kernels just so. We say tanta for corn. Tanta. Clara repeated carefully, earning approving nods. She tried the grinding motion herself, discovering it took more strength than it appeared. Her arms tired quickly, but she kept at it, determined to learn. Throughout the morning, Clara soaked in every new word and custom shared with her. She watched children playing a game with painted stones, learned how to weave thin reeds into a simple basket, and sat entranced as one of the eldest women showed her how to identify healing plants, even in winter. Meanwhile, Sam worked with several men at the horse corral, where winter storms had damaged several posts. His experienced hands matched their steady pace as they dug new post holes in the frozen ground. Though few words passed between them, Sam noticed their initial wariness giving way to acceptance as they worked together. By midday, Sam's leg ached fiercely from the labor, but he'd earned subtle nods of respect from the Apache men. They shared a simple meal of corn cakes and dried meat, passing a coffee pot around the worksite. One of the younger men asked about Sam's cavalry experience, and soon they were trading stories about horses they'd known. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Nate called them to his lodge. He'd prepared the guardianship papers Sam had brought, written in careful English. Two tribal elders were present as witnesses, their weathered faces solemn as Nate signed his name with deliberate strokes. These papers give you the right to care for my granddaughter, Nate said, handing the quill to Sam. But the true responsibility was given when she chose you. Sam signed his name beside Nate's, feeling the weight of the moment. The elders added their marks, making it official in both worlds' eyes. Clara watched the procedure with bright eyes, standing between her grandfather and Sam like a bridge connecting their lives. As twilight gathered, the camp shared a celebration meal. Stories flowed around the fire in both English and Apache, tales of hunts and harvests, of courage and comedy. Clara sat close to Sam, occasionally translating the few words she'd learned that day. Her face glowed with joy, but Sam noticed her gaze returning to him often, as if making sure he was still there. When the moon rose, clear and cold in the winter sky, Clara touched Sam's arm. Can we talk? She whispered. They walked a little way from the fire, their boots crunching on frozen grass. Clara's breath made little clouds in the air as she gathered her thoughts. I love it here, she began, gesturing to the camp. I love learning about my mother's people, and grandfather is wonderful. But ... double quote, she took a deep breath. I want to go home with you. To the ranch. I belong with you, Pa. The last word slipped out naturally this time, not by accident. Sam's throat tightened with emotion. You're sure? He asked softly. Your grandfather's folk would welcome you here. Clara nodded firmly. I'm sure. You're my family too now. Besides, she smiled, someone needs to help with those chickens of yours. Sam chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Reckon they do at that. We'll head back at first light, if that suits you. They returned to the fire, where Sam told Nate of Clara's decision. The old man showed no surprise, only wisdom in his dark eyes. The path between two worlds is not easy, he said to Clara, but you have the strength to walk it. You will always have a place here with your mother's people." As the fire burned low, and people began retiring to their lodges, Clara reached into a small pouch at her waist. She pulled out something small and dark, pressing it into Sam's palm. It was a wooden bead, polished smooth by years of handling, with intricate carvings. Catching the firelight. "Grandfather says this belonged to my mother," Clara explained softly. "It's a token of family trust. I want you to have it." Sam stared at the small treasure in his hand, understanding the magnitude of what she was offering. Without a word, he carefully tucked the bead into his vest pocket, right over his heart. Clara's smile told him he'd done exactly right. They would leave in the morning, facing whatever waited back in Calico Crossing together. But for now, they sat by the dying fire, watching the moon climb higher over the silent winter landscape. The carved bead rested safely against Sam's chest, a constant reminder of the trust placed in him and the family he'd unexpectedly found. The morning air bit sharp and clean as Sam and Clara broke camp. Heavy clouds hung low, promising more snow. Sam's leg protested as he helped Clara into the buckboard, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. The signed papers were tucked safely in his coat pocket, along with the precious carved bead. "Might take us 3 days to get home in this weather," Sam said, settling onto the wooden seat. "Snow's making the going slow." Clara nodded, pulling her blanket tighter. "I don't mind. More time to plan what I'll do with my new room." Her smile warmed. "The cold morning. And maybe you could teach me more about the ranch?" "Reckon I could," Sam clicked to the horses. "Come spring, we'll need to fix that garden fence. Plant some vegetables, too." He glanced at her. "Maybe get you a horse of your own to train." Clara's eyes widened. "Really? My own horse?" "Got a gentle Mari that'd suit you fine. She's young, but steady. Good bloodlines." Sam adjusted the reins as they headed north. Every rancher needs their own mount. They traveled slowly through the morning, snow starting to fall in thick curtains. The horses plodded steadily, their breath steaming. By afternoon, the wind picked up, driving the snow sideways. Sam kept one eye on the weather and another on the terrain, looking for shelter. "There," he pointed finally. "That canyon will give us protection for the night." They made camp in the lee of towering rock walls, the worst of the wind whistling harmlessly overhead. Sam got a fire going while Clara laid out their bedrolls. The flames cast dancing shadows on the canyon walls as they shared a simple meal of beans and jerky. Sam poured them both coffee, though Clara's cup was mostly milk. "Come spring," he continued their earlier conversation, "we'll start your riding. Lessons proper. Need to learn all the basics: grooming, tacking up, reading a horse's mood." Clara hugged her cup, eyes bright with plans. "Could I help with the cattle too?" "One thing at a time," Sam chuckled. "But yes, eventually. Might even teach you to rope, if you've a mind to learn." They talked about the future as darkness settled in, about fixing up Clara's room, maybe adding some curtains from the mercantile, perhaps even getting a few chickens of her own to tend. Clara's responses grew sleepier until she finally dozed. Off by the fire, wrapped snug in her blanket, Sam settled in for watch, rifle across his knees. The night was quiet except for the occasional pop of burning wood and the distant cry of a coyote. He thought about the changes coming to his solitary life and found himself welcoming them. The carved bead pressed against his chest, a reminder of promises made in the deepest part of night. When the fire had burned low, Sam's head snapped up. Something had changed in the canyon silence. He listened intently, years of cavalry training coming back. There, the soft clink of metal on metal, the muffled thud of hooves on snow. Sam moved quickly to Clara's side, shaking her gently awake. "Quiet now," he whispered, dousing the fire with snow. "Someone's coming." Clara blinked awake, instantly alert at his tone. They pressed back against the canyon wall, Sam positioning himself in front of her. 3 riders materialized from the darkness, their horses' breath clouding in the cold air. Sam recognized them, the deacon's hired men from town. The lead rider pulled up, waving a paper. "Got orders here to collect the girl," he drawled. "Signed by the judge himself." "Those papers are forged," Sam said evenly, feeling Clara trembling behind him. "I've got legal guardianship documents right here." He started to reach for his coat pocket. "Don't move," another rider warned, drawing his pistol. Sam's hand inched toward his rifle instead. "You boys best ride on," he said, voice hard with warning. The first rider spurred his horse forward suddenly. Sam grabbed his rifle, but the third man had circled behind them in the darkness. A blow caught Sam from behind, sending him sprawling. His bad leg buckled as he tried to rise. Clara screamed as rough hands seized her. Sam struggled to his feet, but another blow sent him back down. Through blurring vision, he saw them lifting Clara onto a horse. "Pa!" she cried out, fighting their grip. "Pa, help!" Sam pushed himself up, but his leg wouldn't hold. The riders wheeled their horses, Clara's struggles growing fainter as they galloped away. Sam's shout of rage echoed off the canyon walls, answered only by the wind and falling snow. He slumped against the cold stone, chest heaving, the taste of blood in his mouth. The carved bead pressed against his heart like a burning coal. They had taken Jesse's daughter, his daughter. The deacon would pay for this treachery. Dawn was still hours away. Sam forced himself to breathe slowly, to think past the fury and fear. They'd left tracks in the fresh snow. As soon as he could stand, he would follow. Sam pressed a handful of snow against the gash above his eye, the cold doing little to dull the throbbing pain. Blood trickled down his cheek, freezing in the bitter night air. His leg screamed protest as he dragged himself to his feet, using the canyon wall for support. The horses stamped nervously, still unsettled by the violent encounter. "Easy there," he murmured, limping to his mount. The gelding stood steady as Sam pulled himself into the saddle, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through his battered body. He gathered the reins with trembling hands, pointed the horse south, and kicked him into motion. The moon broke through scattered clouds, casting enough light to follow the trail back to the Apache camp. Sam rode hard, pushing his horse as fast as he dared in the treacherous conditions. Each hoofbeat echoed his racing thoughts. Clara needed him. He had promised to protect her, and he had failed. The carved bead bounced against his chest with every stride, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Snow began falling again, thick flakes catching in his beard and coating his shoulders. Sam ignored the cold, focused only on covering ground. The journey that had taken most of a day now passed in a blur of shadow and starlight. His horse's flanks were lathered with sweat when the first cookfires of the Apache camp finally came into view. Dogs began barking as he approached. Warriors emerged from their lodges, weapons ready, until they recognized him in the pre-dawn light. Clara's grandfather stepped forward, his face grave as he took in Sam's bloodied appearance. Sam dismounted awkwardly, his bad leg nearly buckling. "The deacon's men," he gasped out, steadying himself against his horse's shoulder. "They took Clara, ambushed us in the night." The words tasted bitter as ashes in his mouth. "I need your help to get her back." The old man's eyes hardened like flint. He spoke rapidly in Apache to the gathered warriors, his voice carrying clear authority. 5 men immediately broke away, heading for the horse herd. Sam recognized several who had shared the corral work with him just days before. "We ride now," Clara's grandfather said in English, gesturing for one of the women to bring Sam a water skin. "The deacon, he is snake in man's clothes. We'll try to hide her, send her away quick." Sam nodded gratefully, taking a deep drink. "He's got papers, forged ones. Might try to put her on the morning stage, make it look legal." The Apache warriors returned leading fresh horses already saddled. Each man carried a carbine, ammunition belts crossed over their chests. They mounted smoothly, gathering around Sam and the grandfather with practiced efficiency. "We know short paths," one of the warriors said, adjusting his rifle. "Can reach town before sun is high." They set out at a ground-eating lope, the warriors leading them along trails Sam would never have found on his own. Their horses moved surely through the darkness, steam rising from their flanks. When one of the men noticed Sam's mount tiring, they diverted briefly to a small ranch Sam didn't recognize. The rancher emerged with a lantern, took one look at their grim faces, and wordlessly let out fresh horses. Sam noticed the man and Clara's grandfather exchange respectful nods, clearly old acquaintances. The exchange was made quickly, and they were moving again within minutes dot as false dawn began painting the eastern sky. They approached Calico Crossing from the south. The warriors spread out automatically, using the rolling terrain for cover. Sam pointed out the deacon's house on the edge of town, its windows still dark. "Stage comes through at 8 o'clock, Sam said quietly, checking his pocket watch in. "The growing light. Deacon will want her gone before most folks are up and about." Clara's grandfather studied the silent town, his weathered face unreadable. "How you want to do this?" "Do this." Sam considered carefully. "We wait. Watch the house and the stage office. He'll have to move her sometime. Better to catch them in the open than storm and guns blazing." He looked at the old man. "I don't want Clara caught in any crossfire." The grandfather nodded approval. "Wise thought. We will place men here, and here." He pointed to several vantage points. "No one leaves town with my granddaughter." The warriors moved to their positions with ghost-like silence, carbines ready but hidden from casual view. Sam and the grandfather settled behind a low ridge overlooking the main street, their horses ground-tied in a nearby draw. The sun crept higher, painting the town's weathered buildings in shades of gold and rose. Sam flexed his aching leg, grateful for the rest but itching to move. The cut above his eye had finally stopped bleeding, though dried blood still caked his face. "Your son," the grandfather said suddenly, his voice low. "Clara's father, he was good man?" Sam thought of Jesse's laugh, his steady hands, the way he'd died saving Sam's life. "The best I ever knew," he answered honestly. "Would have been proud of his daughter." The old man nodded slowly. "Then we honor him today. We bring his child home." Together, they watched the town wake, waiting for their moment. Sam's hand strayed to the carved bead in his vest pocket, touching it like a talisman. "Hold on, Clara," he thought. "We're coming." The morning sun cast long shadows across Calico Crossing's muddy streets. Sam and the Apache warriors kept to the darkness between buildings, their eyes fixed on the rail yard. Steam billowed from the waiting locomotive, its black iron form hulking against the pale winter sky. Movement near the station caught Sam's attention. His heart clenched as he spotted Clara, wrapped in a heavy coat that was too big for her small frame. The deacon walked beside her, one hand gripping her arm. Two deputies flanked them, rifles held casually but ready. "There," Sam whispered to Clara's grandfather, who crouched beside him in the shadow of the mercantile. The old man's eyes narrowed as he watched his granddaughter being marched toward the train. A piercing whistle split the morning air, echoing off the buildings. The conductor's voice carried across the yard. "All aboard. 5 minutes to departure." Sam's jaw tightened. "I'm heading to the marshal's office. Those papers you signed might be our only chance to stop this legal." The grandfather nodded. "We watch if papers fail." He left the rest unsaid, but his warriors shifted their carbines meaningfully. Sam limped quickly through the alley to the marshal's office, his bad leg protesting each step. He burst through the door, startling Marshal Avery from his morning coffee. "Sam, what in blazes?" Sam slammed the guardianship papers onto the marshal's desk, spreading them with trembling hands. "Legal papers, signed by Clara's blood kin." Makes me her rightful guardian. He jabbed his finger at the Apache signatures and official marks. That beats whatever forged documents the deacon's waving around. The marshal picked up the papers, frowning as he read. Outside, the train whistle screamed again. Sam's patience frayed with each passing second. "Tom," he said, using the marshal's first name, "you know what kind of man the deacon is. You've heard the whispers about those other girls." Avery's face showed his inner struggle between duty and conscience. "The deacon has influence with the church council, Sam. They fund half the counties. Damn the politics." Sam's fist hit the desk. "That's Jessie May's daughter out there. My friend died saving my life, and I aim to save his child." Through the window, they saw the deacon's men roughly helping Clara into a freight car. Her face was streaked with tears. Visible even at this distance, something in Sam snapped. He snatched the papers from the marshal's stunned hands and headed for the door. "You can either help or stay out of the way, Tom. Your choice." Outside, the Apache warriors materialized from the shadows, falling in behind Sam as he strode toward the rail yard. Their boots crunched in the snow, a deadly quiet procession moving with clear purpose. Sam's hand settled on his gun belt, the carved bead in his vest pocket pressing against his heart like a burning coal. The train's wheels began to turn, steel grinding against steel. There was no more time for legal solutions. Sam planted his feet before the freight car door, his voice booming across the rail yard. "Clara, get down. Stay low." The deacon stepped forward, his polished boots clicking on the wooden platform. A cold smile twisted his lips as he pulled a folded paper from his vest. "Now, Mr. Brogan, you're interfering with legal proceedings. I have here the proper documents for Miss May's placement with a fine Christian family in Denver." Behind Sam, Clara's grandfather moved forward, his weathered face stern in the morning light. He spoke first in Apache, the words carrying across the suddenly quiet yard, then switched to clear English. "My granddaughter stands under protection of the Apache Nation. Federal treaty guarantees our right to claim our children." His warriors spread out, their presence drawing nervous glances from the deacon's men. A crowd began to gather, merchants stepping out of their shops, ranch hands pausing their morning errands, women clutching shawls against the cold. Their whispers rippled through the crisp air like wind through prairie grass. "Marshal's coming. Them's Apache warriors. Ain't that the May girl?" Marshal Avery pushed through the crowd, the guardianship papers held high in his hand. "Hold up there, Deacon." His voice carried the weight of his office. "I've got legal documents here that need reading." The deacon's face reddened. "Those papers can't be valid. They're signed by the girl's blood kin." Marshal Avery cut him off. He cleared his throat and read in a loud, clear voice. "By right of family and tribal law, guardianship of Clara May is hereby granted to Samuel Brogan, with consent and witness of her grandfather, White Hawk of the Apache Nation." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Sam kept his eyes fixed on the deacon, whose face had gone from red to pale. "This document," the marshal continued, "bears proper tribal marks and witnesses. Under federal treaty law, it stands binding." He folded the papers deliberately. "Deacon Carr, you have no claim here." The deacon's hands clenched into fists. He glared at Sam, then at the marshal, before spinning on his heel. "This isn't over," he spat, but his voice shook. He stormed off the platform, his men trailing behind like scolded dogs. "Pa!" Clara's cry rang out as she burst from the freight car. She flew into Sam's arms, burying her face in his worn coat. He held her tight, feeling her tears soak through to his shirt. The crowd's mood shifted like spring weather. Some people cheered, others shook their heads and muttered, but most simply watched as Sam held his daughter. The law had spoken, and even those who didn't like it couldn't argue. Clara's grandfather placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and she reached out to grasp it while keeping her other arm wrapped firmly around Sam. They stood together, a family. bridging two worlds. While the morning sun climbed higher over Calico Crossing, the winter wind softened as Sam turned to Clara's grandfather. "I'm much obliged for your help," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We wouldn't have made it without you and your men." White Hawk's weathered face creased in a gentle smile. He drew Clara into his arms, speaking soft Apache words that made her eyes shine. Then he placed his hands on her shoulders, switching to English. "You have two homes now, little one. Your mother's people will always welcome you." He looked at Sam. "And now you have a father who fights like a mountain lion for his cub." Clara giggled at that, and even Sam felt his cheeks warm. The Apache riders sat tall on their horses, their faces carrying the quiet dignity of warriors who had done right by their own. With slight nods to Sam and Clara, they wheeled their mounts and headed south, their forms growing smaller against the winter-pale sky. "Come on, daughter," Sam said, the word feeling natural on his tongue now. "Let's get you properly outfitted before heading home." Inside Watson's Mercantile, Clara's eyes went wide at the rows of blankets and winter goods. Sam watched as she ran her fingers over a deep blue saddle blanket with silver-gray threading. "That the one you want?" he asked. She nodded, then hesitated. "It ain't too dear?" "Nothing's too dear for my girl." Sam added the blanket to their pile of warm clothes, thick stockings, a proper winter coat, and mittens that actually fit her small hands. The sun hung low and pale in the western sky as they started the ride home. Clara sat straighter in the saddle now, the new blue blanket bright against her horse's dark coat. As they crested the last rise before the ranch, Sam spotted smoke rising from his chimney. Inside, they found Mrs. Abernathy just finishing up. She'd filled their pantry with preserves, flour, and even a fresh-baked apple pie. "Thought you might need some proper victuals," she said, her usual sharpness softened by a genuine smile. "Welcome home, Clara May Brogan." After Mrs. Abernathy left, Sam took out his tools while Clara warmed herself by the fire. The steady rhythm of his hammer rang out across the yard as he nailed a fresh plank above the gate. The new wood gleamed against the weathered fence. Brogan and daughter. Clara came out to see, her breath fogging in the evening air. She reached up with her mittened hand, tracing each letter as if memorizing them with her fingertips. Her smile outshone the setting sun. That evening, they sat down to a quiet supper of Mrs. Abernathy's pie and fresh coffee. Not many words passed between them. They didn't need them. The lamplight cast warm shadows on the walls of their home, and the joy that filled the room needed no voice to be heard. Spring crept into the high country like a gentle awakening. The snow retreated up the mountainsides, leaving behind tender green shoots that pushed through the dark earth. Along the fence line, Sam watched Clara guide her new mare, a steady sorrel named Copper, with growing confidence. "Keep your heels down," he called out, noting how naturally she sat in the saddle. "That's the way." Clara beamed at his praise, her dark hair catching the morning sun. She'd grown an inch since winter, and her eyes held a brightness that came from knowing she was truly home. The Sunday church bell echoed across the valley, its familiar toll drawing them toward town. Sam hadn't darkened the church door since before the war, but something had changed in him. As they passed the white-painted churchyard, he removed his hat, holding it respectfully against his chest. The bitterness that had lived in his heart for so long had melted away like the winter snow. In Calico Crossing, most folks greeted Clara with warm smiles. Mrs. Watson waved from the mercantile porch, and the marshal touched his hat brim. A few old-timers still whispered behind their hands, but their words held no power anymore. Back at the ranch, they worked side by side in the fresh-turned earth of their garden plot. Clara planted rows of corn and beans while Sam set out tomato seedlings. The soil felt rich and alive beneath their fingers. As evening painted the sky in soft golds and purples, they sat together on the porch steps. The snow-tipped peaks caught the last light, glowing like distant beacons. Clara leaned against Sam's arm, her voice quiet but sure. "We did it, Pa." Sam smiled, his heart full. Jesse would be proud of his daughter, and Sam knew with certainty that God's hand had guided them all along. Sometimes the Lord's greatest gifts came wrapped in winter storms and hard choices. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.